Hi there, I'm James Wylie and I'm the Managing Director of Temper Digital.
I'm Luke Wotton. I'm the Digital Director at Temper Digital.
And we're here today to talk to you about the impact of generative AI search for innovation communities and knowledge owners. And our journey in this world started about 4 years ago when we started working with Connected Places Catapult. And we then, shortly after, we started working with satellite applications Catapult, and more recently with Digital Catapult. And we worked with the three of the catapults to launch the first cross-catapult funding program, which is really exciting stuff. And we help create high-performing corporate websites. We create innovation communities and events platforms. And we produce digital apps to help push innovation initiatives forward. And we really love this kind of work because everyone we work with has a purpose, whether it's doing space travel or making cities work better. Everyone has a real passion for what they're doing and for making things really better. And much better, and we find that really infectious. And right at our core, when we founded Temper, was the belief that truly impactful digital work comes from a fusion of great design and visionary technology, and that's a vision that Luke and I share as founders, and that we see through in our day-to-day work at Temper. And what we're going to talk about today comes from a very, very simple premise, and it's that innovation communities are full of specialist knowledge about important transformations that are critical to humanity. So we should really be harnessing and sharing this knowledge for the greater good. You know, we could make our lives more efficient, we can enable medical breakthroughs, we can slow climate change, and we can really accelerate a transformation of the world at a faster pace. But there's a real issue with this knowledge, and it's locked away in presentations, it's locked away in reports, PDFs, podcasts, discussion forums, and lots of other types of digital assets, which make it really hard to find and make it really consuming to interact with. Like, it would literally take a team of researchers weeks to understand and make use of the knowledge in some of these communities. And that's a real problem. So today we're going to demonstrate how you can use a technique called retrieval augmented generation, otherwise known as RAG, which is an AI search technique which will allow you to create a credible digital expert that can learn and understand all of the information within your innovation community and provide expert answers at the kind of the push of a button. We're also going to talk about the opportunities and threats that this kind of new wave of search brings and how it will impact innovation communities and knowledge owners.
So we've been working with the Digital Twin Hub for a while now. The Digital Twin Hub is a network, knowledge sharing community across academia, public sector, industry, for all things digital twins. And they have over 5,000 members across the globe. They've published over 200 expert videos. They've published more than 200 expert reports, and there's over 1,700 discussions on there between the experts on the network. And we've been building out their community platform and their content publishing platform. During that sort of process, a key discussion emerged, which was how can they make sense of the sheer volume of content that the community has generated? And we're talking hundreds of PDFs with hundreds of pages each, and hours upon hours of video content. And the idea of manually sifting through all that data is quite daunting, to say the least. So that's when we started to explore what can AI do to help make sense of it. We realized quickly that leveraging retrieval augmented generation, so a process called RAG, we could help them quickly organize and analyze all this unstructured information, making it easier for the community to access the insights within. And the potential to cut through that sort of noise and focus on what was really important is a real game changer. So we put it together as an internal tool first, and then realized the potential it could have to be used by the community. So I've put together a little video demo of how it can come together. So you can ask the search tool sort of the question, choose the sources that you want to look into, and then that sort of goes off and starts performing a search and creating a generative answer, pulling from all the sources on the network that we put into it. And this is the generative answer, and then it can highlight the sources themselves that were used to generate that answer, which can lead then someone off to those relevant places. And it can even show videos and the relevant part in the videos where we find the answer to some of the questions that have been asked.
Yeah, I think this is one of the key things when you think about the community and you think about the volume of information and when people are having these discussions, because you might have 200 videos and the 200 videos could have 5 people talking in each of them. And then you might be doing something like how to reduce carbon in smart cities. And that could be discussed 30 times by those 5 different people, 24 different points throughout all these videos. And I think if you were to try then to watch the videos and find those discussion topics without a reasonable index card or understanding what was going on, you'd actually find it really difficult to get a grasp of this information. And the power here is not only can you do the generative search and summarize all the discussions that happened in the context of that topic, but you can then fine tune and jump to the exact parts where those discussions were happening. And you can hear it from the experts yourself and watch it from the experts yourself. I think that's a really powerful transformation that this type of search is introducing that we probably haven't really seen before, which is really exciting for us.
There are other sort of tools that do similar things. This one's called Perplexity.
Yeah, Perplexity is an interesting one. I don't know how familiar everyone watching is. It kind of introduces citations and sources. So it takes what would be like a ChatGPT type approach, and it then starts to give you links out. So for research, it's brilliant. If you're ever researching anything, I'd really recommend using this. I'm sure a lot of people are already, because you get the citations, and so you start to build trust rather than just relying on a long form answer that you're given, or a generative answer that you're given, and trusting that. You actually get to explore the resources. So that's really interesting. There is a slightly downside to this. Obviously, if this type of search becomes dominant, you need to be in those 4 sources in order to get your traffic or brand recognition. So whilst that's a great opportunity and a really interesting search to use as a user, there's quite a threat there if you're used to appearing at the top of Google or in the top of your searches. If you don't make it into those sources, you may be contributing to that answer, but you're not getting any recognition for it. And that's to any knowledge owner that's owning a lot of knowledge in their specialism. That's a potential threat.
We've also got obviously ChatGPT, and now obviously the issue with ChatGPT is, unlike Perplexity, it's scouring the web for all of this information, but it's then presenting it back to the user without any citations as well. So it's coming up with an answer, and they're not even telling you where it's taken that answer from.
Yeah, and this approach, so you get nothing from this, and you may well be contributing to it. And one of the things that we've noted is if you're being a generalist and you're looking for a recipe for a lemon meringue pie, it doesn't really matter because there's hundreds of millions of them out there, and so there's nothing unique happening in that transaction. So that would be fine for ChatGPT to make some recommendations. But if you're talking about how to reduce carbon in smart cities, and you own the top 10% of knowledge in how to do that, and you spend the last 10 years building that up, you don't really want that being released into ChatGPT and giving people answers without the brand recognition and credibility that you deserve for having put that information together. So again, if you're thinking about search opportunities for users, great, because you can get answers to anything you like in a very clear to understand fashion. Threats to knowledge owners and innovation communities is high, because if you can get hold of this information without citing the people, you have another way to get the information, and you're still not getting any brand recognition for it.
And of course, we've got good old-fashioned Google search as well, which I hope we don't need to explain to anyone. But of course, with this, you have to do all the work yourself, and obviously you're at the mercy of SEO and paid ads and things like that sometimes as well.
Yeah, so it's worth noting. Oh, sorry, Luke, before we go on, it is worth noting that you might have noticed that when you type things into Google, it is starting to introduce a Perplexity-like response now, where you get a generative answer and you get some citations as well, which is great. And we don't really know where that's going to end up. But what you can kind of figure out from that approach is that if you're in the top 10 search results, and now you've got Perplexity and you've got less search results, there is less ability to get in that page 1. So that's a potential issue as the search changes. What happens to that page 1 ranking, and how is there another way to arrive at things through Google, or is it going to take you off into something else? It's a key question we need to be aware of.
So there's a big advantage really to having your own, like this.
Yeah, I think the key points here, as you can see, you're choosing what to search on, so you're interacting immediately with the information. You're interacting in it within the website, so you've got the brand recognition already. You've got the answers coming up, and then you're diving straight into the articles. So you're really curating a knowledge experience for your users here, and you are providing the users direct access in some instances, like this video, to the experts that have given that knowledge. So if you consider the 4 or 5 approaches we've gone to, this is by far the most credible answer that you will get, by far. So as you can see, just to recap on what happens when you create your own model, we're searching in sight, so you've got some brand recognition going on there. You can see the kind of things that you're searching through, which gives you more choice and more availability. You're really curating a knowledge experience for your users, which is, you've got the generative answer here, which is more accurate than the generative answer you would have got from any of the previous articles. And then you've got direct access into the topics and into the PDFs. And in this case, into the videos where you can watch the actual experts have the conversation that came up with it. So if you think about credibility and you think about, compare that to the things we've just demonstrated to you, this is by far the most credible way to get answers in this topic that we can see.
So there are limitations to large language models. They're sort of frozen in time often with outdated information, because they have to put together these large models, which takes a lot of time and energy, and therefore a lot of what they're showing is based on stuff that's possibly a year old or more. They don't have access to organizations' proprietary knowledge as well. So if you have anything that's held behind a registration wall or something like that, they won't have access to that sort of expertise. And also it's difficult to trace which data sources like ChatGPT are using when it's producing its responses. So how can we sort of, use large language models, but with our own information? We use a method called retrieval augmented generation. So it's a powerful AI technique. It adds this layer to the large language models that optimize for your knowledge, retrieves the most relevant information at the time of the search, and ensures a more contextually accurate response. So I'm going to go through a little bit of technical stuff now, and about how we do this. Hopefully it won't be too technical. I'll try and keep it quite high level. But the most important thing to start with is to make sense of your information. So we have to start converting it into a way that the computer can understand. Now, things like PDFs and videos, they're what we call unstructured data. So we have to sort of clean it up and start to structure it in a way that the machine is going to understand. So with a PDF, for example, we need to turn it into text. And then we need to clean all of that information. So even after we've converted it to text, it needs to be cleaned up. So you might have things like HTML in there, or little tags and this, that, and other, emojis or whatever that might be used in the stuff that you've published. And that needs to be stripped out, so that we have very, very clean text and ready for use. And then we need to do a process called chunking. The large language models only handle a limited amount of text at any one time. So we take large bodies of text that we've stripped out of these PDFs or these transcripts of videos, and we chunk it up into smaller, bite-sized things that can be digested properly by the large language model. Then this is where the really technical stuff happens, we build out what's called a vector database. And that's a specific type of database that's made to sort of process this stuff really, really quickly. We create what's called an embedding model, which converts all this data into numbers that capture the meaning of the input. So an example of that would be, if we had, say, the word king and queen, the model understands that they're sort of quite tightly related. Whereas if you had the sort of king and chair, that might not be so tightly related. So it understands that the king perhaps is over here and chair is over there. And this allows it to capture the key features and meaning of the information you're putting into it, allowing it to understand the different inputs based on their similarities. So once we've sort of processed all of that knowledge, we've put it in the embeddings, and we've got the vector database up and running, we can then ask it a question. And at this point, we ask a question, we retrieve that information from the vector database first, before then it goes over to the large language model. And then what we're essentially doing is augmenting that large language model with this information that we've got in this vector database. So it adds more context to it, and it's going to come up with a more accurate answer.
So just to clarify, can we go back to that diagram? Because I'm not necessarily that technical. So we're analyzing all our information first and then storing that in a database. And then before we ask the LLM models what's going on, we're feeding that all into the LLM model. Does that change the prompts? How does that work?
Yeah, so all of that sort of augments the prompt before when then that prompt gets sent on to the large.
And then it knows to refer back to the documents that we've submitted anyway, and that all comes back to you in your much more contextually relevant answer. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant.
So with access to the most relevant and reliable information from your vector database, the LLM can now deliver accurate responses to the user queries. And this significantly reduces the risk of hallucinations. And hallucinations are where the large language model doesn't necessarily have all the information it needs, but it still will try very hard to come up with a very convincing answer for you. So where this happens a lot is when you're a lot of the time when you're asking it for something perhaps that's been more recently published. So in this case, we sort of put what was discussed at last week's Gemini call at the DT Hub. Now, ChatGPT doesn't really know what happened last week because its data set is built on something from a bit before, but it'll still try and come up with an answer for you, and it will sound very convincing as well. But it won't necessarily be accurate. And here is what we asked it, and it's come up with a convincing answer, but it's not actually from last week's call. It's from a bit of a time ago, from when its model was last updated.
So that's the real issue for trust, isn't it? Because I think I read the stat somewhere that was talking about the younger generations, and because they're being more exposed to these generative search answers, I think it said they were more predisposed to trust it, because it's written rather than doing the research themselves. So I think if we're thinking about credibility, citations play a massive part in that, because this looks like a wholly convincing answer that obviously is completely wrong, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You can ask something like Perplexity, and it's a little bit more honest than ChatGPT, and it apologizes, but it doesn't have the specific information that was discussed. But then it goes on to summarize, obviously, what the Gemini call is in general from the information that it has to hand. So this is a little bit more honest, which is good, but again, it still doesn't have that information to hand, so it can't really give you the answer that you're looking for. But we can, with our own one, access the knowledge because we fed that in there. It's all up to date, and it'll know that this is last week's Gemini call, and it will highlight the summaries and the insights and things from that particular video because it's already got all of that information to hand. So it acts sort of like a bit of a cheat sheet, really. So it sort of hands the large language model a bit of a cheat sheet of the most important up-to-date facts, so that it can guide it to produce more accurate and informed responses.
Oh, that's fascinating. It's not a chatbot. Obviously, I don't know if anyone else saw this, but when we saw a lot of AI tools come out, when Gen AI was very new, everyone made a chatbot, and chatbots for us are historically lead generation tools. They're not experts. Often they don't have too much value because they kind of hover around in the bottom corner and they try and make you interact with them almost at times when you don't really want them. So, they get closed a lot. They ask for your email address. They're an interruption form of anything really. I think one of the things that you might think is that, or people might ask, are you making a chatbot? And no is the answer. This is a credible digital expert. It's also like a serious knowledge interaction experience that you're making for your users. You're not making a way to ask a question and submit a ticket to a help desk or be pointed to an FAQ file. It's really not that kind of it's not that kind of thing at all. I think when we were testing this with the DT Hub, one of the directors from the DT Hub had a government presentation. So he asked the expert that we created, how it should structure the presentation, and it answered, and the feedback to us was that was pretty much bang on what I would have said. So the level of answers that you can get, I would say directly related to the level of information you have. If your information is all in the last month and it's all based on one topic, you're obviously going to get answers that are skewed to the last month based on one topic. But if you have a well-rounded set of information on the topic, on huge topics of interest, this is a really useful tool and a potentially really powerful tool that you can start to use. Business benefits. So let's talk about some of the benefits you can have. There's obviously one of the things that you can get from what we've discussed is the change that's potentially underfoot, and no one really knows. It's not really a scaremongering tactic, but there's obviously going to be a change in user behaviors as these types of interfaces are picked up and used by people on a daily basis. So people's expectations are going to change, and the way people interact is going to change. And I think anyone that tries to predict exactly where that would end up is probably, a finger in the air kind of person. But I think the benefits of this particular approach is you can be in control of how your customers interact with your knowledge, right? And if you're a knowledge owner, again, if you go back to the lemon meringue pie, if you're not really safeguarding a recipe unless you have some of the top knowledge about how to reduce carbon in smart cities, in which case you might want to put that to good use or make sure you're getting the credibility for that. So you get to retain all the brand association, when your knowledge is used. You can put the community at the center of your knowledge interactions, which should then be a bit of a self-perpetuating tool to grow your community. So if you can position your community as a place of value and importance and a world leader of the topic, then more people will come to the community and contribute to the community. And then the AI and the generative AI tools can learn and absorb that knowledge and then become more knowledgeable. So the whole thing can start to feed itself if controlled well and controlled carefully and fed with the right content. So community growth is really important. You should see increased engagement around content in areas. We should be able to grow community. There's a potential for paid subscriptions. If you have an expert and it's being used by corporations to improve their facilities or the things that they do, why can't that be a paid model that you could leverage to do better research and more things? So there's lots of opportunities there in the sense of how this can help underpin community growth and engagement. You can collect first-hand data on what people are looking for. So if anyone that's ever tried to understand what people think when they're using a website, it's really difficult because people are clicking on navigation and things. Whereas asking someone an open question, they're literally giving you the words of what they're looking for. So you can get some real insights as to what people actually think, and even down to the words that they're using to describe, the techniques or the knowledge and the things that you're using, which is really important. And then you can use that to plan better content, and you can inform future initiatives and community growth plans for that. And generally just use the whole concept to be a more valuable knowledge resource for the people who would find it useful. And this is a good one for us because everything we've shown you today looks like a search engine. You arrive at a thing at a prompt, you type in what you want from the prompt, and it gives you an answer, which is one use, and it's a use that everyone is used to when you look at something like ChatGPT. But typical website behavior doesn't do that. You're not about to replace your entire community with a prompt. So the smart money is on using this technology and weaving it into the customer journey so that you can start to improve the journeys of people when you have some information about them. So if I'm moving around a community and I'm browsing different topics or I'm looking at different sections, you can then start to pull out some ways of interacting with that section and then using the generative AI and techniques to find the answers. So if you're looking at a podcast page or an articles page, you could have a summary. Do you want a summary of our latest podcasts? Yes, that would be great, please. Then you can find out what's going on. If it's a key topic page, a good one for right now is resilience against extreme weather. If you've got some articles around that, or you've got a page about resilience and how to build that in, you could suggest some potential answers and some questions that people might want to see. Or on the general page, you could just give a list of top questions. These are the things that people who come here ask. And then that's going to open up a whole load of people to exploring things that they wouldn't have explored before because they wouldn't have known how to do it. So I think it has the ability to add another layer of context onto a journey when someone's browsing a website. And I think that for us, we find that quite exciting. And we don't see many really good ways of, we haven't seen many good examples of that happening yet. So I think that's something that's definitely to come from this technology. And obviously, one thing to note is carbon use of this technology is much higher than normal. So if you're doing lots of searches into large language models, you're introducing a lot more carbon. So anything that you can do to reduce open-ended requests and answer specific requests will mean you might run one request rather than 15, and then you've used 15 times less carbon to get to that point. So any kind of good design techniques that can anticipate user behavior and then combine it with a large language model to join those together is probably a much more useful user experience, and it will result in much less carbon than someone just going into ChatGPT and asking it 50 times for the answer. And that's that from us. We really hope you found the talk useful. I mean, we've really enjoyed putting it together. Just to recap some of our learnings, search is going to change. It just is going to change over the next 2 years. These things are starting to become more embedded. We're going to move more to a generative answer-based approach. Citations are replacing links, but there only seems to be space for a few. We see 4 or 5. So how do you get into that space with your knowledge so that people can know who you are? There's a huge risk that you'll be contributing to answers and not getting credit. One question we ask people is, do you have a policy that dictates how AI can access your company's information? And people look at us quite scared when we ask that question quite a lot. So I think the answer to that is a lot of people don't have that policy in place yet. So there is definitely a risk you'll be contributing to answers without getting credit. There is, however, great opportunity to knowledge on it, to capitalize on the knowledge and become a real masters of the model. So if you can own the space and move into it fairly quickly, and you do have knowledge worth, the top 5-10% of knowledge in your areas, you can become a real knowledge owner for that area, and then really own the market doing that. And also, it's not, whilst it looks very technical and it looks very difficult, it's not as expensive as you might think. RAG technology is much easier to implement than training a model yourself, which would cost tens and potentially hundreds of millions of pounds. So it's not as expensive, as difficult as you think, and it's certainly becoming more commonplace. And we think in the next 2 years, this won't be a new talk. This will be how everything works, and everyone will just be used to it by then. And that's it from us. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our contact details are there. And I believe there's a QA in the comments. So if you have any questions, please ask, and we will respond to the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.